Picasso's former handyman and electrician comes forward with 271 paintings. Where did they come from? Hi there, welcome to Plain English. I'm Jeff, JR is the producer, and this is episode 214 of Plain English, the best podcast for practicing English. That's because we go at a bit slower than native speed so you can understand every word. And if you miss a word, don't worry, because you can find a transcript of the program at plainenglish.com/214. Coming up today, Pablo Picasso's former handyman had a trove of 271 paintings in his garage. So he says. A court says otherwise, and the handyman has been convicted of possessing stolen goods. Later on, we'll talk about the phrasal verb zero in on, and we have a quote of the week often attributed to Picasso, but that too was stolen. I'll tell you the quote and who originally said it later on in the episode. I've been asking many of you, what is the hardest thing about learning English? And by far, the most common answer is speaking. There are a lot of answers, but the most common is speaking, and I know exactly what you mean. I am going to be working on some additional ways to incorporate speaking practice into Plain English and Plain English Plus. And if you'd like to tell me what the hardest thing about learning English is for you, then join our email community at plainenglish.com/mail, M-A-I-L, and you'll get the opportunity to write back and tell me the hardest thing for you. And once again, to the hundreds of you, literally hundreds, who wrote back already, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. Take a peek in most people's garages, and you can usually expect to find things like cars, lawnmowers, rakes, tools, garden implements, things like that. You might even find stored holiday decorations, old bikes, or a discarded tire. But what about millions of dollars worth of art stashed away for decades? That's what Pierre Le Guennec says he had in his garage. The handyman and electrician says they were a gift from his former employer, a certain Pablo Picasso. A court says otherwise. He and his wife were convicted of possession of stolen goods. Pablo, Diego, José Francisco, de Paula, Juan, Nepomuceno, María de los Remedios, Cipriano, de la Santísima Trinidad Ruiz y Picasso, or mercifully for short, Pablo Picasso, was one of the most famous artists of the 20th century. He is world-renowned for his paintings, sculptures, drawings, ceramics, and prints, and is especially known for being one of the creators of the Cubism style of art. He created more than 40,000 pieces in his career, and his work is popular around the world. His painting, Women of Algiers, version O, the 15th in the series, sold for $179 million in 2015, and Le Rêve sold for $155 million back in 2013. It's not all smooth sailing, however, because he's so famous and because he produced so much in his career. His work is often the target of high-quality forgeries. Picasso pieces have been stolen several times over the years. The FBI database of stolen art is full of records of stolen Picassos. Enter Picasso's electrician, handyman, and possibly loyal friend, Pierre Le Guennec, and his wife, Danielle Le Guennec. Mr. Le Guennec, now 80 years old, worked for Picasso earlier in the 20th century toward the end of Picasso's life, and he did several odd jobs. Initially, Mrs. Le Guennec claimed that Picasso gave the couple the artwork as a gift, as thanks for Mr. Le Guennec's loyalty back then. That is a lovely gift. However, the story has evolved. Subsequently, Mr. Le Guennec said that Picasso's wife at the time, Jacqueline Roch, gave him the artwork. He said that she was trying to hide it from her stepson, Claude Picasso. As the story goes, the ex-wife asked the Le Guennecs to hide about a dozen garbage bags with Picasso's work, and in the end, he says she generously gave him one of those garbage bags full of art as a token of her gratitude, and, according to the story, they've been in the garage ever since. In 2010, the Le Guennecs gathered up several of the pieces in a suitcase and brought them to the Picasso estate in Paris. Pierre Le Guennec said that he had cancer and he wanted to authenticate the paintings for his children. The only place to do that was at the office of the Picasso estate. If Mr. Le Guennec or his children ever wanted to sell the artwork, they could only do so if the pieces had been authenticated first. The estate is run by Pablo's son, Claude Picasso, the very same person that the art was supposedly being hidden from way back when. Claude took a look at the paintings and determined that they were, in fact, authentic, but he also believed that the pieces had been stolen, and he called the police. The artwork was then seized from the Le Guennec's residence, a total of 271 pieces created between approximately 1900 and 1932 were confiscated. A lawsuit later followed. Claude Picasso and the estate think the paintings were stolen and that the handyman is being used as cover to bring the art back into the legitimate market. They have zeroed in on the credibility of the handyman's story. They think that several parts of this story don't exactly hold water. First of all, Pablo's son believed that his father simply would not have just given them away, especially in a large collection. In addition, almost all the pieces of work were not signed, as most Picasso gifts were. Then there is the matter of the trash bags and the garage. The seized pieces were in good condition. Had they been stuffed in a trash bag and stored in a garage, they would have deteriorated. Instead, lawyers think the art was preserved, as if by a private collector, an expert, or an art lover. Speaking of which, the artwork, stuffed in a plastic bag, remember, came with a detailed academic-style catalog, which the estate thinks would have been beyond the handyman's abilities to create. They think the catalog was written by an expert, such as an art smuggler. Over the last several years, this battle has played out in court with seemingly no end. Claude Picasso initially filed a lawsuit in 2010, and the Le Guennecs were first convicted of theft in 2015. They appealed, and the conviction was upheld in 2016, then was overturned in 2018. An appeals court ordered a new trial, which is the one that just recently took place. This final conviction can no longer be appealed. Despite their suspicions of the Le Guennecs, the Picasso estate has not been able to provide solid evidence that the couple was involved in a more elaborate scheme with art thieves. For now, the paintings sit in the Bank of France. What a story. Picasso produced so much, 40,000 objects. That's incredible. I went to a Picasso exhibit at Bellas Artes in Mexico City probably 4 or 5 years ago. The exhibit had some of his work, but it was really about Picasso himself, photos of him, things like that. And I remember this photo of him in his studio. He's standing there painting, no shirt on, canvases and unfinished works piled up all around him, grandchildren running around everywhere. And I remember thinking, all these things, these paintings, everything, this is all someday going to be preserved under glass, sold for millions of dollars, kept in temperature-controlled rooms, authenticated, insured, and here they are just laying around his garage, not yet finished. I can still see that photo in my mind. I'd like to say hello to a few listeners from Argentina today. Luis is an accountant from Yerba Buena and just got back from an epic vacation in the United States. Silvio lives in Tigre, a part of Buenos Aires, the capital, with his 2 teenagers. And then Nicolas, an architecture student, also in Buenos Aires. So hello to Luis, Silvio, and Nicolas, and thanks so much for being in the audience with us. Today's expression is a quirky one. It's not one that you absolutely must know, like last time, but it's a good one to know, especially in the business world. To zero in on something. That means to take aim or focus your attention on one thing. I would say you usually use this when you're trying to solve a complex problem or investigate something. You zero in on, you focus your attention on one small part of the complex problem. Earlier, you heard that the Picasso estate has zeroed in on the credibility of the handyman's story. They can't prove the paintings were stolen. There's no police report, no evidence that they were in someone else's house or gallery, no documentation, no receipts, no money changing hands. There's no hard evidence that they were stolen, but the estate is zeroing in on the credibility of the handyman's story. They're focusing their attention on this one thing, on the credibility of his story. That's the part that suggests something is awry, the credibility. So they keep looking into this story. Really? These were in your garage this whole time? Really? You wrote this professional catalog? Really? They were preserved so well in just a trash bag? They zeroed in on the credibility of the story. They focused on the credibility of the story. I saw a story in the news that the governor of my state of Illinois and the mayor of my city, Chicago, will zero in on corruption. The governor says he's furious watching public officials betray the public trust. So he's going to focus his attention. He's going to zero in on corruption. The Brazilian government is zeroing in on a ship that it thinks was responsible for an oil spill in September. The oil spill hit hundreds of beaches and harmed the fishing and tourism industries, but the source of the spill had been a mystery. Now, authorities are zeroing in on a single ship that was in the area. They say it was the only ship that could have discharged so much oil into the ocean at the time. They are now focusing their investigation on that ship. They are zeroing in on that ship. I wanted to pick a quote from Picasso for today's episode, and I came across a quote that I've frequently seen attributed to him. But one thing I've learned since including these quotes is that very often the quotes you see on Instagram or on the internet are not accurate. So here's a quote often attributed to Pablo Picasso. Here it is. I am always doing what I can't do yet in order to learn how to do it. In truth, that quote was first written in Dutch by Vincent van Gogh in a letter to a fellow painter in 1885. Regardless, I like it, and it rings true for me too, since I am now figuring all kinds of new things out as the proud owner of a new membership website, something I never thought I would have or be able to figure out. So here is our quote again. I am always doing what I can't yet do in order to learn how to do it, by Vincent van Gogh. That's all for today. Thanks for being with us once again. JR and I will be back with another episode coming up on Thursday. Hopefully no tongue twisters for me on Thursday. We'll see about that. So we'll see you then on Thursday. Now, if you've enjoyed today's episode, then I think you'll love Plain English Plus, our new membership program. That's not even that new anymore. We've been going for about 4 months. And this is the best way to get even more out of the podcast you already know and love. With a Plus membership, you can listen to a fast version of the program, watch a video lesson with each episode, build your vocabulary with Quizlet flashcards, and of course, use our famous interactive translations. It's a great way to build your confidence and train your ear in English. Come join us at Plain English Plus by visiting plainenglish.com/plus, Plus, today.